I'm sure it comes as no surprise to most of you that Bluepoint Games has officially closed, as it was all over the gaming news spaces when Sony first announced it. Some people were very shocked and upset to hear this, which got me wondering about the company. I only knew them from their Shadow of the Colossus and Demon's Souls remakes, but clearly I was missing something, so I decided to do a bit of a deep dive on the history of the company for my own knowledge, and now I completely understand why this is such a huge deal. This was a company that cared, first and foremost. They were gamers at heart and just wanted to bring fun, memorable experiences to other gamers too. They put thought and care into their remakes and made a point to get the little things right, the details that can make or break a player's immersion. Things that many AAA companies couldn't care less about. Just butcher IPs so it can continue to line the CEO's pockets. Bluepoint was all about the gamer and the game. Money kept their lights on, but it was not a driving force behind what they did, and this quote from Bluepoint's president, Marco Thrush, says it best. Sometimes the reason why we work so hard on these games is because we don't want to fuck it up for ourselves as gamers, Thrush says. Like, we enjoy these games, we would want to see this game done justice. It hurts me seeing other companies just taking it and basically doing it for the money. This studio was full of extremely talented, knowledgeable, and passionate people. And the fact that a company that focuses on generative AI and NFTs is still here while Bluepoint is not, well, it's a tad infuriating, not gonna lie. I mean, look at this article. Just look at it. This article was only 2 weeks before closing Bluepoint. And as of 2025, Sony was still investing into fucking NFTs. I gotta rein myself in here. This isn't the focus of the video. I want this video to be for people to remember Bluepoint, to share their history, showcase the talent and love behind the people who made the studio what it was, and demonstrate why I think their closure matters, and why you should think so too. Bluepoint Games listed themselves on their website like this. A proud member of PlayStation Studios, Bluepoint Games was established in 2006 and has grown to a team of over 80 people. We have taken the next step in our growth, from our history of delivering the highest quality remasters and remakes in the industry to developing original content. We are always striving to push our limits and surpass expectations. Our latest projects will be the most ambitious in our history, the kind of challenge that inspires the most talented developers. Our founders were part of the Metroid Prime engineering team and have been in the industry for over 20 years, while the majority of the team has been in the industry for at least 10 years. With each game, we set out to achieve industry-defining visuals and gameplay, while fostering the growth and success of our team. And as of April, the site no longer loads, the end of 2 decades of work. The company was founded in 2006 by Andy O'Neill and Marco Thrush, 2 former Retro Studios employees. Retro Studios being a game developer and subsidiary of Nintendo. Andy O'Neill graduated from the University of Birmingham as a Bachelor of Science in 1994, which Retro Studios wouldn't even come into existence until 4 years after he graduated. He worked on his computer at home to create programming demos, which he would send off to companies, and he got a job as an entry-level programmer in C++. He moved to Austin to work for Acclaim, and then went to Retro Studios, where he was the lead programmer in Metroid Prime. According to an interview he gave to IGN, he left Retro Studios at the end of 2005. And when asked if Bluepoint was an independent company, O'Neill replied, "Oh yeah, we're independent, absolutely. We're a pretty small company. Sony has been absolutely fantastic to work with. They have amazing, amazing support. It's been a great experience working with them." Well, that didn't age very well. After leaving in 2005, Andy then founded Bluepoint Games in January 2006 with his co-worker at Retro, Marco Thrush. As for Marco Thrush, there's no real biography out there that I can find on him, so my information is sparse. But what I was able to find is that he joined Andy O'Neill in co-founding Bluepoint Games, stating, "We wanted to go down our own path and do our own thing." There is a quote from him that I found that I do think helps sum up his feeling about his company and the work that they do, though. "It's just, you don't even care," says Thrush. "It's not respecting the original source material and all the hard work that the original developers poured into the game." Judging from the interviews and remarks that he has made, it is apparent that he put the player, the customer, first, while also having deep respect for the creators of the original IP and wanting to stay as true to their vision as possible. Bluepoint's first game was Blast Factor, the first downloadable game on the PlayStation Network on PS3. It got middling reviews for the most part, hovering around maybe a 6 out of 10 for most review sites, but they delivered a product that they were proud of, and right on time to boot. This left an impact on Sony's view of Bluepoint. Quote, because we were, in Sony's sight, somewhat reliable, and one of the few people that actually pulled through and delivered things on time, they kind of took a little bit of a risk with us, Thrush says. The company released 2 expansions for Blast Factor, the first being a multiplayer pack in February 2007, but the DLC with additional gameplay features, and what many consider to be the defining version of the game, was called Advanced Research, which released in August of 2007. Andy O'Neill claimed that Bluepoint learned quite a bit from reviewers of the base game and aimed to fix many of the issues that critics panned. Quote, for Blast Factor Advanced Research, we made a laundry list of changes and improvements based off player feedback and hindsight, after having some time to put the original game in perspective. When asked why Bluepoint created DLC instead of a sequel, O'Neill said, the second and main reason is that we felt bad about the reception of the original, Blast Factor, and we wanted to make people feel good about Blast Factor with Blast Factor Advanced Research. It's a goodwill kind of thing. While God of War 3 was being made for the PS3 in 2010, Sony wanted to port the previous installments to PS3 before God of War 3 released, but the Santa Monica team, the developers behind God of War, did not have the resources to do both. So Sony, seeing how reliable and competent Bluepoint was with Blast Factor, decided to reach out and see if they could help make this tight deadline a reality. And they did. Called the God of War Collection, it was released for PS3 in 2009, only 4 months before God of War 3 officially released. The collection was well received, with general reviews in the 9 out of 10 mark, with only the PlayStation Vita version scoring lower, and which was not ported by Bluepoint, but another company entirely. In an interview with Edge magazine, Bluepoint discusses some of the ease and difficulties of making these ports within the timeline given by Sony. Santa Monica's internal team would have taken longer, basically. Bigger teams have got more inertia, explains Bluepoint's president, Andy O'Neill. It was a very difficult timeline, but a nice, clean codebase. Let's just say there were some bets placed on whether this would get done on time or not, but we got it done and worked hard to pay attention to the detail. For God of War, we actually got a big virtual knife and chopped off their entire renderer and replaced it with ours. That was the easy part. Essentially, to sum up this next little section, Bluepoint had to deal with divide by zero glitches, huge texture sizes, post-processing issues with cinematics, localization troubles, and missing fonts. With the success of the God of War collection, Bluepoint had secured themselves a position as skilled porters and remaster pros, while showing they could be relied upon for difficult projects. The next project they worked on was Ico and Shadow of the Colossus Collection, which released on September 27, 2011. Judging from interviews, Fumito Ueda of Team Ico wanted to see Ico and Shadow of the Colossus on the PS3. Quote, initially, I didn't want to consider that, he pointed out. I always thought they were designed for PS2 and should stay there. But lately, I've been thinking it would be nice to provide the games to other platforms to reach more users. But it would depend upon whether Sony would give the A-OK, as Team Ico / Japan Studio were a developer division of Sony Interactive. Given the success of the God of War collection, it's likely Sony didn't hesitate to say yes, and I'm sure would have trusted Bluepoint to spearhead this project as well. However, Bluepoint worked in close conjunction with Japan Studio / Team Ico in development of this collection, earning them high praise from the game's creator. Quote, the thing about that outfit, Bluepoint, is that they won't just take on any project, noted Ueda. They won't accept projects that their head, of the company, doesn't personally like. They're real craftsmen that way, and they really understood everything about Ico and Shadow of the Colossus before accepting it, which is something I really appreciated. Bluepoint also went above and beyond to create the vision of an Ico and Shadow of the Colossus remake that could make Ueda proud. Quote, Bluepoint Games played a major role in making this effect work, talking about support for 3D televisions. Because 3D isn't just about making an image, you need to fine-tune everything and keep in mind where the player's looking. Making the games 3D compatible was our idea, but Bluepoint made it into something beyond what I imagined. In the interview with Edge magazine, issue 233, O'Neill and Thrush actually discussed some of their hurdles with implementing this 3D compatibility. O'Neill is quoted as saying, "Oh, that sounds really interesting, but really hard, because we've got to run everything twice when it's already hammering the crap out of the hardware." And later on, Thrush agrees, saying, "The standard approach is you just put the focal point on the player and give the player a depth slider to adjust the strength of distortion. But as soon as you get anything close to the camera, your eyes can't focus. You get window violation stuff." The team also discussed the difficulties in general of getting these two games onto the PS3, as the games were developed using Linux for starters, and the games had issues with upscaling, transparency, and assembly functions that wouldn't compile. But Bluepoint put their heart and soul into this collection, and it shows, as the collection has received high praise, with general score of 8 to 9 out of 10 from most review sites, which further cemented the reputation of Bluepoint as being a talented and reliable team. From here, Bluepoint also worked on the Metal Gear Solid HD collection, which included 7 different games. It was released on November 8th, 2011, meaning that Bluepoint was busy working on 2 very different collection sets during 2011, Eco and Shadow and Metal Gear Solid. Judging by the difficulties they had with Eco and Shadow, this must have been a very stressful time period for them, but the company seems to thrive on that. There isn't a whole lot more information I can find on this collection, unfortunately, no behind-the-scenes footage or interviews, but the collection was a success, getting mainly 9 out of 10s on multiple review sites, even going so far as to receive the award for Best HD Remake of 2011 from Team Xbox Games of the Year. Bluepoint worked on miscellaneous projects following the Eco and Shadow collection and Metal Gear Solid. They developed PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale alongside Superbot Entertainment for the PlayStation Vita. The game received a generally good review score, sitting at around 7 out of 10 for multiple review sites. Bluepoint also worked on porting the game Flower to the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation Vita, which received glowing reviews, sitting at a general 9 out of 10 for the ports. Unfortunately, this is about all I can find for these games. Hopefully that means that they were straightforward works and that there was no funny business involved in getting them ported over.
It was only a matter of time.
All of our fight, all of our sacrifice has bought us this one day.
And then there was Titanfall. Ah, Titanfall. Now we're getting to the meat and potatoes here. So, this is a game that was released in 2014 for the Xbox One, but was ported backwards by Bluepoint Games. You might be asking why they would do this, as I asked myself the same question. From my understanding, the game was supposed to release on Xbox One and 360 at the same time, which is why Titanfall developers Respawn outsourced the project to another company to complete, as they couldn't have done both versions at the same time. However, the 360 version was pushed back to April 8th, 2014, whereas the Xbox One version released a month prior. With the Xbox One being a brand new console at only 4 months old, it would make sense that Respawn would want to focus on creating a game for current-gen consoles. But if they also wanted a 360 version, then why not start there? From a discussion I found on Digital Foundry with Respawn's lead engineer, Richard Baker, it's noted that the dev team didn't actually plan to release on Xbox One initially. This makes me wonder if the team could have been pressured into a 360 release as well by contracts or publisher deals. I would imagine porting from PC to Xbox One would have been a far easier thing to manage, and the Respawn team likely could have said yes to that without much issue. But perhaps 360 was tacked on by suits who don't understand what a colossal undertaking that would be? From another note in a different Digital Foundry interview, it sounds like the Respawn team didn't actually think it was possible to port to 360 at all. So why would they bother? The decision might not have been theirs to make. Quote, I think the general response from Earl Hammond, lead software engineer, and Richard Baker, lead engineer, was along the lines of a positive, sounds like you guys know what you're talking about, and, well, we don't think it's really doable on 360, but yeah, good luck with that. It sounds to me like Respawn didn't really want this, but maybe their hands were tied. If anyone knows more, I'd love to hear it, but for now, that's my take on that. Moving on. So, how did Bluepoint get this opportunity? According to O'Neill, quote, we had a mysterious meeting scheduled with EAP, which is Electronic Arts Partners, at GDC, the Game Developers Conference, March 2012. Wow, that was a long time ago. They wouldn't say what the project was before the meeting, but that it was a big deal. A few weeks later, we were off to talk to the Respawn engineers in LA about the project. That mysterious meeting was to task Bluepoint with fitting a 5 gigabyte game onto 500 megabytes for the Xbox 360. Xbox One had 10 times the RAM than 360. Let that sink in. Quote, things started getting interesting when we finally got the thing to compile and boot on Xbox 360 with the realization that half of our memory was gone without loading any models, textures, or maps. With a single player, our average frame rate in Fracture, which is a Titanfall map, was around 5 FPS, and that's without any textures, O'Neill said. It took a lot of clever ideas and manipulation of code and hardware limitations to make the game not only run, but run well. Quote, long story short, we've replaced the world renderer, collision system, visibility system, animation system, asset pipeline, audio system, stuffed in a streaming system, and compressed the crap out of the assets to make it fit on a DVD. We basically ended up with a crazy Franken engine by the time we shipped. Not only did Bluepoint manage to take all these headaches and still port this game into a smooth 360 version, but they also added 2 different frame rate options to boot. All in all, the story of Titanfall on the 360 is worthy of its own video, like Modern Vintage Gamer's helpful video on the subject. If you want to know more about the porting fun that Bluepoint had on this project, his video is definitely worth a watch. But if you want something even more in-depth, and honestly a bit over my head at points, then you can check out Digital Foundry's comprehensive interview with O'Neill on this apparently impossible port. I'll put the links in the description. At the end of the day, the 360 port was impressive with how much work had to be done, and at the same time not compromising on player enjoyment and faithfulness to the Xbox One version. Titanfall was massively popular, scoring 8s, 9s, and even a 10, and I know it holds a soft spot in many gamers' hearts to this day. Once again, Bluepoint showed the gaming sphere just what exactly they were capable of. And as an aside, before moving on, I found a few comments from Bluepoint President O'Neill during their Titanfall time that I thought was rather wholesome, and an accurate portrayal of his team. All of these come from his Digital Foundry interview. Quote, but suffice to say, a lot of really talented people worked really hard to make this fit. Quote, the real story is that it runs well because loads of hard work by the team. Basically, a talented group of guys and girls working really hard. Quote, people seem really happy with our version of the game. They're having fun, and after all is said and done, making something that people appreciate and enjoy is a real reward.
Beyond the world we know, there are lost civilizations, filled with priceless treasures.
The next thing that Bluepoint worked on was Uncharted, the Nathan Drake collection. This collection contains remastered versions of the first 3 Uncharted games, and Bluepoint Games had started on this project in June 2014, only 2 months after their achievement with Titanfall 360. It took Bluepoint 15 months to complete the Nathan Drake collection, which, at this point in their career, had been their longest project thus far. They were able to use the codebase from The Last of Us Remastered, released a year prior, to help them create the Nathan Drake collection, with Marco Thrush saying, quote, The Last of Us code base itself was actually an evolved version of Uncharted 2, not 3, meaning it didn't have some of the functionality required to make Uncharted 3 work. Still, having access to the Last of Us engine for reference helped a lot. Bluepoint had to remove the option for a multiplayer and also had to remove any behind-the-scenes extras in order to get all 3 games to fit on one disc. But even so, the collection received glowing reviews, sitting at around 8 or 9 out of 10. This was a project that Bluepoint Games was specifically sought out for. The original game was a PlayStation Vita game, and the team behind it, Japan Studio, which some of you may remember Team Eco from, realized that they could do so much more with the gravity functions of the game if it were released on PS4. Translated, quote, "As the team continued testing PS4, we were told we could show even more advanced gravity action, and after some consideration, we decided to move the project entirely." Japan Studio had decided to have Bluepoint cover the remaster, while the original devs continued to work on Gravity Rush 2, where Bluepoint surprised Japan Studio with just how quickly they can get work done. The game released on February 2nd, 2016, to good reviews, generally scoring between 7 to 9 out of 10.
So when we take on a game that has Shadow's prestige, a lot of responsibility comes with it that you can't just brush off. This is a classic. There's no denying what it is in people's minds in the space of games, and that we had to make it as great as people remember it being all over again.
Now, I could gush forever about Shadow of the Colossus on all of its systems and what it means to me as a gamer and as a creative soul. But that's not what this video is about, so I'll do my best to rein in my ramblings here. So there are a lot of interviews and sources for Bluepoint's work on this project, and I did my best to cherry pick moments and comments that I thought were helpful to showcase the care and attention that they put towards this port. But there's still so much more out there that are definitely worth looking into if you want a full dive on this. So, Shadow of the Colossus was announced at E3, may you rest in peace, in 2017, and Bluepoint Games was once again tasked with bringing the game to a newer console. Only this time, Team Eco was more hands-off in its development, likely trusting Bluepoint Games to do a damn good job, while allowing Ueda to continue working on his own project.
The one thing that's definitely good is that Ueda has a great amount of trust in what we do, because we had already done the remaster, and so I think that helped a great deal on our current project.
That doesn't mean that they didn't communicate, however. Ueda had a few suggestions as to what changes he would like to see, but ultimately left it in Bluepoint's skilled hands. Bluepoint were able to start with the PS3 version of Shadow of the Colossus that they had built, which made things easier when upgrading to the PS4 remaster. And for this remaster, they really wanted to focus on getting the artwork right. Quote, "And then on this remake now, we knew all the code, all the engineers that are here, most of them had worked on that exact code base, the PS3 one, so we knew what we had to do. There wasn't any unknowns, which allowed the engineering staff to focus a lot more on making sure the art pipeline was as good as possible. The rest of the engine gets as good as possible." This also meant more attention to detail, as they also wanted to stay true to the immersive experience of the original while keeping up with current gen, at the time, visuals and expectations. Quote, "We realized very early on, as more realistic looking art appeared in the game, that a lot of the other things that were like holdovers from before, or a lot of things they didn't do before, we couldn't really get away with anymore. Like not having a realistic fogging model that properly shadows, or even something as simple as not having footsteps in the sand." And another quote from Marco, "It's a lot of attention to detail, right? Colossus' fur behavior changing when he's underwater versus above the water are tiny little things, and most of them you will probably and hopefully never notice. But they're just there to not make it pull you out of the experience." A lot of attention to detail is right, and honestly, it seems to be the bread and butter of what makes Bluepoint Games remasters so well done, as showcased in the next 2 clips.
As you would get the art to come in and all the pieces to start to form, you would start to notice that there's just the little details are lacking. to Wander not paying attention to where I look, to, you know, the bubbles that are released as Wander swims around. And as we started adding all those little things, it was great because it sort of motivated the team to really see the attention to detail that needed to be put into this title and encouraged us to push further. If you play the game and notice, in the original PS2 version, the bowstring is always on the outside of Wander's arm. Well, as we started playing the game and you start looking at details and paying attention to what's actually going on, you're like, it's actually quite awkward. Like, nobody actually carries a bow like that. So we reworked all of the animations associated with the bow to basically rework it so that the string is on the inside of the arm, so it's much more natural to how an individual would actually carry a bow.
Not only did they understand how the little things, like water bubbles and fur movements, could help sell the environment you're wandering in, but to even understand that the way Wander carries the bow is awkward and unrealistic? I never would have noticed that, personally, but they put the time and attention into it because they actually give a shit about the product they're making. Another example I thought was a perfect point of realistic detail. Quote, while remaking Shadow, the studio discovered a U-shaped river that fed two waterfalls, but lacked its own source. To resolve that apparent impossibility, the team added an incoming river. As much as we can without it destroying the original game or really having a negative effect on the original game, we try to fix these inconsistencies now that we have the chance, Thrush says. And for fans of Shadow of the Colossus, you'll understand just how much the environment means when it comes to immersing yourself in the Forbidden Lands. So, small changes like this can actually make a huge difference for a game port like this. Now, to show the more technical side of things, Bluepoint were able to achieve an updated look, but same gameplay feel, for Shadow, by having the original code run all the logic steps in the background, the class-A movements, attack patterns, etc., while Bluepoint's own personal engine focused on the nitty-gritty details, like water droplets or fur rendering, sometimes bringing both together to create a cohesive and beautiful end product that still feels like the Shadow of the Colossus that we know and love.
And then we'll also go in and we create these like little hybrid systems, like take Wander, for example. The Shadow version of the engine has a version of Shadow inside of it that communicates with a version of it inside of the Bluepoint engine. And most of the logic and behavior is defined within Shadow, but then the Bluepoint engine will add additional things, such as the Wander's poncho is completely within the BPE space, to additional foot IK that will add to the game, to the head tracking that we talked a little bit earlier.
I could go into so much more detail about this remake and the care that went into it, but again, this video is not about that. But I did want to show that this is a team that really cared about the work they were doing, and I think a perfect example of that is their collaboration with Nomad Colossus.
There's a guy, Nomad, who goes through and has broken down the entire PS2 version of the game. We actually reference his website, like perhaps more than we actually should, to understand the inner workings of the entire game. We actually flew him out to the office towards the end of development to give him a chance. We really wanted to have him sit down and play it. He was kind of excited when he played the development build, and we showed him that we could access the debug menu and fly behind the scenes of all of the environment that was there, which was very similar to how he had sort of split up and cracked the PS2 version. But we don't allow that anymore.
According to Nomad's blog, he had initially reached out to Bluepoint Games in the hopes that he could get a copy of the demo press kit that other YouTubers had been receiving. And while he didn't receive a response at first, eventually someone did reach back out to him. Thanks to NDAs, however, Bluepoint had to be selective about what they could say, but Bluepoint was eventually able to confirm that Nomad was invited to tour their studio and got to play the game the day before it released. Quote, this was the day before launch day, so Marco and Steve led me into a darkened office where I could play the PS4 version. It was a very exciting moment. They sat down on either side of me to watch me play. They wanted to hear my impressions and thoughts about the game they had spent the last 2 years working on, and from the outset, I had no complaints. only great praise and respect for what they had created. And for those of you who have played the PS4 Shadow of the Colossus, you'll know what the 79 Steps to Enlightenment / coins are, but might not be aware that they were also inspired by this fan and his blog posts. Quote, "There are no coins, they're relics." So the relics were pretty much a nod to the greats, such as Nomad of the Colossus, who, way past the original release of the game, continued giving this title extra leg and extra life. It was a nod to those people who give them something else to find, to give them the reason to want to play the new game, and also maybe to convince new people to look more in depth at the beauty that is the environment. Honestly, Nomad's blog is great and has some really fascinating behind the scenes info, not only on their visit to Bluepoint Games, but about Shadow of the Colossus in itself. I strongly recommend checking out their blog for yourself. I'll put the link in the description. And, of course, Nomad was credited at the end of the game, along with Bluepoint's deepest thanks to the community in general. There are a lot of sources out there for info on this remake, but I definitely pulled most of my information from two prominent sources, GameSpot and Digital Foundry. So huge thanks to them, and I definitely suggest people give these videos a look if they want to know more. I'll put the links in the description as well. Anyway, I'll try to wrap this up. Shadow of the Colossus on PS4 received damn near perfect scores from multiple review sources, ending up with a 91 out of 100 on Metacritic. And to finish this section up, here's one last quote from Peter Dalton, technical director at Bluepoint Games, because this phrase now lives rent-free in my head.
But we also, if you look at it, we kept the bone joints that hang around Wanderer's waist. Those are actually the original PS2 coder that coded those up. We left those alone because I don't know who that guy is, but he's amazing.
First off, I just want to say that while researching interviews for Demon's Souls on the PS5, I was brought to a post on Polygon, where the wording led me to believe that Polygon had their own interview with Japan Studios' creative director, Gavin Moore. But parts of it felt fishy. It wasn't until I delved a little deeper to find more sources of information that I stumbled across Game Informer's video interview with Gavin Moore, where his exact answers were posted on Polygon's site, with some of the wording seemingly rearranged in the same way we would write high school essays to avoid paraphrasing. Then I noticed Polygon didn't always claim that they had this information firsthand, using words like said during a video call. Yeah, they never specified that video call was Game Informer's.
First off, how long have you been working on this game?
3 years. Yeah, so we've been thinking about doing this game for a very long time. It's one of the most beloved games in the PlayStation catalog, and it's also, beloved by fans, and it's the most requested remake in our catalog. So, we've been thinking about doing it for years, but we never thought we could do it justice. And it wasn't until we kind of refined what a remake should be with Shadow of the Colossus on the PlayStation 4 that we felt that we could take on the challenge of Demon's Souls and actually do it justice. So, yeah, we started making the game immediately after, releasing Shadow of the Colossus on the PlayStation 4. So 3 years now.
I mean, what are the chances that Mr. Moore said almost word for word the exact same thing in one video call to Game Informer and then in another video call to Polygon? Am I crazy? And even when mentioning the difficulty.
And they shouldn't be. I think that the original challenge is fair. It's all about learning, enemy patterns and learning your environment, and then knowing when to move forward in combat with that risk-reward system, when to attack and when to back off. And a lot of people tell me, oh, Demon's Souls is such a hard game. I actually don't believe it is as hard as people imagined it was.
Come on. What are the chances that he used the exact same phrasing or wording in two separate interviews? I suppose stranger things have happened, and if Mr. Moore is interviewing with multiple different places, he may have a bit of a script tucked away in his head, sure, I suppose that's possible, but it doesn't feel right. I even searched Polygon's page to see if maybe they quoted their source anywhere, like they got info from more than just this interview, but no. They merely mention at the start that they spoke with Mr. Moore. So, did they really? I decided to get my information elsewhere. I thought Polygon was a reputable site, but then again, I've never researched a project this heavily before. So if anyone has any information on how great, or possibly scuzzy, Polygon is, please let me know. Like, was this a one-off thing for them? Am I overthinking this? Anyway. On to Bluepoint's Demon Souls. So, thanks to the stellar work of Bluepoint Games on their previous remasters, and working closely with Japan Studio and Team Eco during some of those, Bluepoint was a no-brainer choice when it came to the next remaster idea, Demon Souls, which released in November of 2020. Not only did Japan Studio work with From Software on the PS3 version, but many employees at Bluepoint were also huge fans of the original, so it appeared to be the perfect match for bringing Demon Souls to a modern audience. Bluepoint took what they learned from Shadow of the Colossus and put that towards Demon Souls. And much like previous projects before that, they worked on getting the original version of the game up and running on the new console before settling down into the nitty-gritty and deciding what exactly is the core of the game, and then not touching it. Quote from Mark Skelton: "First and foremost, we were all in agreement up front that the layout of level design, encounters, and creatures should not be adjusted. We felt that the essence of the game was in the brilliant cadence of these elements working together to form the soul of the game. We focused our attention on the overall fidelity and the quality of life improvements throughout the game when bringing it to modern gamers as a PS5 launch title." And they didn't skimp out on fidelity. Gavin Moore, creative director on Demon Souls over at Japan Studio, stated that they even went back to the motion capture studio to redo all the player animations again, which, according to his interview with Game Informer, was the most foolhardy thing or decision that we made on the game.
With all the player animations again, which was the most foolhardy thing or decision that we made on the game, because we have to match the cadence of the original. We can't change the walk speed, we can't change the run, we can't change any of the attacks. But we wanted to make sure that we improved upon the quality and brought the quality up to the level of a game that, you know, modern gamers expect these days on a AAA title.
But damn if it didn't look good. And just like Shadow of the Colossus for the PS4, Bluepoint considered this to be a remake, not just a remaster. So they built their assets from the ground up, giving the PS5 a launch title that could really show what the console was capable of. Quote from Justin Wagner, environment and lead material artist: "When determining how to modernize the textures for Demon Souls, it was very important to study the original game. Once we felt we had a good understanding of the original developer's intentions, we began planning an inventory of textures and materials that would help support each level's setting and backstory." And like many of their projects before this, they scoured the internet for forum posts, videos, and anything else fan-related to get a sense and feel of what players wanted and what they thought of the original game, in order to stay true to that vision while possibly giving quality of life extras that fans really craved. Quote, "First and foremost, we studied what the character was meant to be in the original game. We read through game lore, played many hours of the original Demon Souls, and studied the original concepts created by From Software back in 2008. We watched videos of players and read forums, understanding what players loved and remembered, and we did our best to recreate how fans of the original remembered characters and encounters." Like always, Bluepoint made sure to understand the source material and what made the original so special before trying to improve upon it. And they may have missed the mark on some of their changes, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. Unfortunately, during game development of Demon Souls, co-founder of Bluepoint Games, Andy O'Neill, passed away. There doesn't seem to be a reason stated, but he died young at only 47 years old. This must have been an incredibly tough time for the company, and Annie is honored in the credits of Demon Souls in a very touching tribute. Even with the hardship of Andy's passing and COVID quarantine on top of that, the Demon Souls remake finished on time and received glowing reviews, generally scoring 9 out of 10 from many review sites. The Demon Souls remake was completed in 2020, and Sony Interactive acquired Bluepoint in 2021, making them a first-party developer for PlayStation Studios, and marking the beginning of the end. Quote, "There is a long history of trust between Bluepoint and SIE," said Marco Thrush, president, Bluepoint Games. "We share the same values and we're equally committed to creating great new games. Joining PlayStation Studios will empower our team of highly talented and passionate creators to take the quality bar even higher and undertake more ambitious projects while retaining our company culture and identity." From what I can find, this was the last major project that Bluepoint worked on. Bluepoint is listed as having assisted Santa Monica Studios with creating Ragnarok, but the extent of their help is unknown. From here, Bluepoint started work on a live service God of War game, but it was cancelled in January of 2025. After 3 years of development and multiple failed live service games sputtered out by Sony. According to a Bloomberg article by Jason Schreier, the game was going to follow Atreus falling into Hades, with a loose idea was for players to control different versions or aspects of Atreus as they battled through Greek hell, and to have some sort of cooperative gameplay and ongoing support. Apparently, some Bluepoint staff were less than thrilled about having to create a live service game, preferring to have worked on another traditional action game instead. Bluepoint struggled with creating a game that was so vastly out of their element, so it isn't that surprising that the game was ultimately cancelled. Once the project was cancelled, though, Bluepoint decided to pitch an idea that they were passionate about: a Bloodborne remake. But surprisingly, FromSoft were the ones to say no. According to an interview with Shuhei Yoshida, retired Sony exec, it's speculated that Bloodborne director Hidetaka Miyazaki wants to do any remasters himself, as soon as he has the time.
My theory is, because I remember, Miyazaki-san really loved Bloodborne, what he created. And so I think he is interested, but he's so successful and he's so busy. So he cannot do himself, but he doesn't want anyone else to touch it. So that's my theory.
By October of 2025, Bluepoint was seen hiring more staff for a third-person action game, as posited by Tech4Gamers website, which shows a screenshot and link of the job listing, which of course is no longer available for obvious reasons. By February 19th, 2026, Sony had announced that they were closing down Bluepoint Games, as they were struggling to find their spot within Sony's walls. With no original game on the production line and no remasters to focus on, Bluepoint was left in the lurch and ultimately let go. I can't help but feel that they could have continued to thrive had Sony not put all of their stupid eggs into the stupid live service basket for 3 years. But I digress. As of March 2026, Bluepoint Games is officially shut down, and as of April 1st, their website is no longer accessible. As a quick aside, there has since been, purportedly, interviews with staff from Bluepoint Games after their closure who talk about the cancelled God of War project, but unfortunately, I cannot verify the source. It is merely stated by somebody named Detective Seeds on Twitter, or X, who is using an AI image as his profile picture. Sorry, but AI pictures for professional websites, companies, or people immediately get my hackles up. Plus, this guy has been banned from the r Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit for being inaccurate. So I don't plan on covering these supposed interviews here, but you can find them fairly easily online if you're so inclined. So, where are they now? I can't find much information about where some of their big names are, including any notes on LinkedIn, although I did see this on Marco's page, which I found to be incredibly sweet and a little sad. I feel like they must have been really good friends. It must have been very rough to be remastering a major game while struggling with the loss of a friend you've had for 20 years, and having to continue the company in his stead. My heart goes out to the team. And I suppose it might be too soon to expect a lot of the team to have already found new jobs, and honestly, I think they deserve a break anyway. They've worked hard their entire career, and I'm sure 2026 has started off pretty stressful for them. So hopefully they got a nice severance package that they can take a breather with. I know not everyone will agree with me, but Bluepoint Games was a team full of gamers who cared about the work they did. They were a skilled, talented team who managed to pull off some truly impressive feats during their career. Like, Titanfall still blows me away. And thanks to this team, Shadow of the Colossus has been brought to more audiences twice now, on PS3 and PS4. As someone who completely threw myself into that game on the PS2, I love that it's still being remembered and loved all these years later. And thanks to Bluepoint, I actually got to play Eco. I had never even heard of the game until I played the original Shadow of the Colossus and joined a couple of Yahoo forums. Christ, I'm old. Anyway, I was able to experience Eco because of Bluepoint, and I'll always be grateful for that. And while I don't own a PS5, I did work at GameStop for a few years when Demon's Souls was released, and I always thought the game looked gorgeous. It's the entire reason I wanted a PS5 to begin with. I was so curious to see how they envisioned the game with a modern look, and watching streamers play it on Twitch is my guilty pleasure. And while I know some people are not happy with the artistic direction Bluepoint went for it, and I completely understand why, I still think they did a great job with it all the same. And those who really want to immerse themselves in the lore of Demon's Souls should still try the original, which, as far as I can tell, can be purchased off the PlayStation Store directly from a PS3, if you still have a PS3. Remakes aren't going to please everyone, unfortunately, but as a fan of the original, I'm still pretty happy with what I've seen in the remake too. But I haven't actually played it for myself, so I suppose my opinion here can't hold too much weight because of that. Anyway, I made this video because I was looking into Bluepoint when I heard about their studio shutdown, and I learned a lot about them as I went along. From the interviews I've read and watched, they truly seemed like a company that cared about the gamers, not just the consumers, and wanted to create products they could be proud of. Games that they themselves would enjoy playing.
Other than that, it's artists that care, programmers that care, everybody just caring on the team and wanting to make it as good as it can be, and putting the effort in that it takes to get there.
And their interaction with the community is proof of how authentic they were. Like, Nomad the Colossus is an example of the kind of thing that original Blizzard would have done back in the day. I love that they paid him respects like that, and he was able to get such a cool experience just because he was such a fan of this random game. The whole thing just gives me the warm fuzzies. And yet, shortly after being acquired by a major player in the gaming and entertainment sector, they get shuttered. A conglomerate that cares only about their shareholders and sees games as a product, not an experience. I hate this. I remember when games were made by people who just wanted to try cool new things and share a story and a world with people. Now it's just a way to line someone's pockets while butchering what made games special to us in the first place. Games used to feel magical to me. I can't remember the last time a new game gave me that feeling or got me excited to hop in and play. Dragon Quest Builders, maybe? And that was 10 fucking years ago. Ugh. I don't want to rant too long here, as I want the video to showcase the people and the history of Bluepoint and not just my angry ramblings. But I hate that yet another company of people who care get forced out by the execs who don't care. And of course, as I've been editing this, Epic just laid off over 1,000 employees too, one of whom has fucking brain cancer. And while not a gaming company, Oracle also just laid off thousands of people too. Thanks, AI! Life's getting more expensive and everyone's losing their jobs. 2026 isn't off to a strong start. But back to the purpose of this video. I'd like to give my warmest goodbyes to Bluepoint Games and hope that they all land on their feet and stay in touch. Better yet, I hope Marco makes a new company and rehires all the talent they had, but this time, not trust a AAA company going forward. It sucks that Sony really helped them out when they started, but 2006 Sony was a very different Sony than 2026's. And I think Bluepoint's team have proven their worth in the gaming sphere to the point that they could start over fresh with a fantastic reputation and get work just from that aspect alone. Maybe Gen Design could do a collaboration? For those unaware, Gen Design is the company that Mr. Ueda founded after leaving Sony and Team Eco, and he clearly has a lot of respect for the Bluepoint team. Perhaps they can rise from the ashes in the future. Anyway, that's about it from me. I'd love to hear your comments, critiques, or suggestions though. I put a lot of research into this, but there are a lot of sources on the internet, and it's possible I could have missed some or completely misunderstood others. I'm fallible, but I do my best. If anyone has more information or wants to correct something I was mistaken about, I am all ears. I'd also love to hear any of your own thoughts and memories surrounding Bluepoint and the games they've made. I'm fueled by nostalgia, so feel free to send some my way. And one final note, this video was supposed to come out in April, but life just smacked me hard in the face. I ended up not having as much time or energy to get this done as I would have hoped, and as I'm sure you can guess, this was a hefty project, as I'm doing the editing, the research, voiceovers, clips, and everything else by myself. So I apologize to my non-existent fans that this is about a month late to the party, but I think the information still stands. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.
That is, it's not a burden, it's an honor and it's a great responsibility to take on. And we're fortunate that we're in a position where we can do that.
It was an absolute honor to work on this project. It was so cool, man. It's like a once-in-a-lifetime thing.